Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is It Watches, It Sees, It Waits. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. Fear is almost poetic in a way. Since I was little, I had always had that weird feeling in the back of my mind, as if I was being watched. Someone was peering around the corner at me. Usually, the feeling only came on at night, and I had come to the understanding that it was a natural human phenomenon. Some people just have to deal with the effects more than others. It's all in your brain chemistry. When my boyfriend and I eventually moved into our apartment, I figured that being in such a public layout of housing space would shake some of those intrusive thoughts away. For a while, it did. Things were fantastic for a long time, and almost 8 months had gone by before the familiar feeling finally returned. It was summertime, early August. The air had been humid all day, but it was finally starting to cool down due to the night breeze coming in. I had the kitchen, bedroom, and one of our living room windows open for a nice cross breeze. My boyfriend had a closing shift at his job, so he wouldn't be home for another hour or two. Usually, I didn't have any issues being here alone. I never minded. Tonight, however, felt different. Something felt off, and I couldn't place what it could be. My anxiety got the best of me, so I tried to put on some upbeat music to sway my thoughts. I scrolled my phone for a few minutes until I found a decent playlist to listen to, turned my speaker on, low volume so it wouldn't disturb any of our neighbors, and decided to doodle for a bit. About a half an hour went by when I realized I was getting fairly hungry. I had neglected to make anything for myself earlier, and I had planned to eat dinner with my boyfriend before he was called into his last-minute shift. I trekked into the kitchen and started the process of preparing French toast and sausages. I'd always been a fan of breakfast for dinner. I was finishing up my late meal when the creeped-out feeling flooded my body quicker than it ever came on before. I froze. I had been eating on my couch, and something in my mind was telling me that I needed to stand up and turn around towards the window. I bolted up from my spot on the couch, moving towards the bedroom. We lived on the ground floor, so having that feeling of severe anxiety made me immediately want to get up, shut and lock all the windows. I closed and locked the bedroom window and hurried out to the kitchen to do the same. Walking back past the front door to the living room, I double-checked that as well to be sure it was locked. I crept over to the living room window, the last open window in the apartment. For some reason, my heart was pounding. I closed and locked that window successfully, and a wave of relief started to wash over my whole body. I moved back to the couch and flicked on the AC, knowing it would start to get hot in the apartment without any of those windows open. It couldn't have been 30 seconds after I sat back down. The banging started. Loud, rhythmic slamming on the window that I had just slid shut and locked, not even a minute earlier. My breathing stopped instantly, and I held my breath, unsure how at the time to work my lungs, muscles, or thoughts. I stared, horrified, at the open crack in the curtain, which allowed whatever was out there to see me, although I could not see it. Silence. Nothing. I refused to move, refused to take my eyes off that small crack of space. Would the police do anything? Would they even find anyone outside? Would they or my boyfriend even believe me? Questions circled my mind as I stared ahead. I turned my head to reach for my phone. and the banging immediately started again, more rapidly this time. I was on the verge of hyperventilating now, not knowing what to do, but knowing I needed help. I grabbed my phone as the rapping continued on the glass of the window pane, repeatedly. As I looked away, tears were flowing down my face as I called 911, quickly putting the call on speakerphone so I could hear the dispatch officer as I texted my boyfriend to warn him of the situation. "Babe, someone or something is outside our apartment window. Be careful coming home. Police coming soon to check. Love you." I typed to him and took my phone off speaker as the dispatcher answered the call. He asked me what my emergency was, and I told him what was going on. He seemed highly concerned and told me to stay where I was, unless someone came into my apartment. He wanted me to stay on the line until an officer came by, which didn't take long at all. I could see the glow of spinning red and blue lights closing in between the blinds of the kitchen window. I watched from my window as the officer got out of his patrol car, shining his flashlight around the front and side of the building before leaving my line of sight. After a minute or two, I could see his flashlight bouncing around the backyard area of the unit, right near the same living room window that had been slammed on. I felt safer knowing that there was an officer checking things out for me. I kept updating the dispatcher on what was going on from my viewpoint, mostly as I needed to stay on the line until the officer actually came into contact with me. Feeling that slight relief, I decided to peer out to see if the officer had found something. To my horror, it looked like something had found him instead. From my window, I couldn't tell if the officer was alive. I could see him on the ground, crumpled into a tight fetal position. It was hard to make out much of him, but I could see a figure standing over him. The officer's flashlight was angled in such a way that I was able to see the thing's face. Angular, contorted, furious. Its eyes were black, deep, hollow holes. It was smiling, I think, and staring right back at me. It took everything inside of my soul not to scream, but the dispatcher was still on the line. As my surroundings came back into focus, hearing him frantically speaking through the phone line brought me back to reality. I yanked the curtain shut and went into my bedroom, which had the easiest escape window. I tried to comfort my cats, who were both very spooked at this point. The dispatcher sent more officers and eventually had one of them meet with my boyfriend, escorting him to the station so he would be safe away from here for the time being. I didn't hear any sirens or see any lights. I figured they were trying to sneak up on him this time. Despite how terrifying his face seemed, I knew it had to be just a guy in a Halloween mask or something. I'd never seen anyone around here who looked like him, and although we were new to this apartment complex, I wasn't new to this area and had lived around here for most of my life. The dispatcher broke the silence with an eerie phrase. Fear is almost poetic, in a way. My heart skipped a beat as I realized how monotone and emotionless his voice became. Move to the door, he spoke. Officers are outside. I hesitated, not wanting to move. I need to know that he's been caught, I replied, suddenly unsure. He's gone. They're questioning him further when he arrives at the station. Slight reassurance. I slowly moved from my bedroom to the living room, grabbed everything I needed to quickly walk out the door. Moving closer to the front door of my apartment, I felt my heart drop as that all too familiar feeling spread over me. Once again, I need you to open the door. The dispatch officer urged me on. The anxiety made my ears ring. Open the door. As the dispatcher shrieked through the phone, the banging started again, this time at my front door. Whatever was out there was waiting for me to come out. The whole time, Open the door now. Open the door now. Open the door. Open the door! His voice was unrecognizable compared to who I was talking to before. Demonic, evil. The voice seemed to have 2 or 3 separate tones to it and sent chills down my spine. I quickly hung up, realizing there was no dispatch officer, no help, no one. I peeked out the window, seeing nothing. There was only one entrance to my apartment, and it seemed that whoever, or whatever, had been out there earlier was now waiting in the outer hallway of the unit. I shuddered, thinking about that mask, so disgustingly realistic. Everything had been silent for a good 15 to 20 minutes, so I decided to peer back outside. Panic struck my thoughts as I saw my boyfriend walking around the corner. I suddenly realized, if only part, or none, of the dispatch conversation was real, he wouldn't be with any officers. He wouldn't be safe. My heart pounded as I tried to call him. I didn't want to distract him from keeping his guard up, but he also needed to know that something was seriously wrong. He didn't answer. If I hadn't been focused on the creepy dispatch conversation, I would have realized that he hadn't seen any of my texts either. His phone is usually charged before he goes into work, but he was covering this shift at the very last minute for someone, so he never had the chance to charge it before leaving. The realization that he had no idea and was walking into this blindly was like a slap to the face. I knew there was little to nothing I could do. I ran towards the bedroom window and knocked quickly, telling him to stop, frantically motioning with my hands. I unlocked the window and forced it open, shaking my head. I told him not to come into the unit. There was someone in the outer hallway trying to get inside. I think he may have thought I was joking at first, but immediately tuned in to how shaken I must have looked. He insisted on coming in, told me to close the window and get ready to unlock the door for him. I hadn't heard anything in the hall for a while, so maybe it would be fine. Everything would be okay at this point. Maybe the thing wasn't even out there anymore. I had probably bored it away by not opening the door soon enough. I could hear my boyfriend loudly open the unit door, and I waited for what seemed like hours for him to get to the front door of our apartment. He gave a quiet knock to let me know he was right there on the other side of the door. "There's no one out here," he laughed, and I sighed, able to breathe again. I opened the door, and there he was, standing in front of me, lifeless, maggots spilling out of the black, eyeless holes in his face. His lips were parted, revealing a swollen, cracked gray tongue, and then realized I was wrong. It wasn't a mask at all.